Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of Turning Book Scenes into Art. I'm going to start with A Court of Thorns and Roses. This one's very popular, so like and subscribe and let's make this into some art. First, let's set the stage with some quotes. There, in a clearing surrounded by towering trees, lay a sparkling silver pool. Even from a distance, I could tell that it wasn't water, but something more rare and infinitely more precious. It is a literal starlight, and it's described as silver, blue, red, pink, and yellow. And there are way more descriptions, and you could read the ones that I wrote down. But now it's time to actually try to start painting this description. I feel like books create such vivid images in my head that I always want to try and capture them. And another cool thing about this scene was that it also described the day around it. It described the flowers and that it was a spring day with lots of floating kind of seeds and dandelions. And so I wanted to incorporate those as well. I made sure in my sketch to kind of put everything out so I would hopefully remember later to add in those fun little details. But now it's time to actually start painting. And this process was really daunting because in the book, Feyre, the main character, literally describes this scene, and she is an artist, and she says this is a scene that she would not even attempt to paint because the day was so perfect that she knew she couldn't capture it. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to capture here, is something that literally is indescribable and uncapturable, a literal lake of starlight. I first started out with my base layer, which is actually one of my least favorite parts about painting. Starting is always the hardest part, number one, but I also just don't like having to set the scene. I just want to jump straight into the main thing, get down to the details, but this is all part of the process. So I just started off by making the background kind of a green color. I tried to make sure that I used a spring green, and I wanted it to really make sure that it read spring since it is literally in the spring court. So I tried my best to use greens that I felt like would bring that to life, and I lightened them up and added more freshness to them later to try and make that even more prominent. But first, I wanted to start working on the trees in the background. I like to save the best for last, and I knew that the Starlight Lake would obviously be the literal star of the show, so I wanted to save that for later because I knew I would have a lot of fun with it, and it would be like a little reward after hard work with the background, especially the trees. Forests and just dense trees are not the easiest thing to paint, so I knew that getting through this part first, it would be so nice to get to work on the Starlight Lake. But for now, I'm just starting to build layers in the background, really build up my color and kind of map out where I want the light to come from. I decided that I wanted it to kind of be coming through the branches from the top left and kind of making streams of light through the trees. That way the forest looked like a dense forest with this lake in the middle, but that way also you could see that it was golden hour like it's described in the book, and that way you could also get some light in there and make it look a little more fresh. I kept working on adding in a lot of different shades of green to really add in some dimension, and then I also started adding some details into the trees to indicate that light source like I was talking about before. But I have a question for you guys. Have you read A Court of Thorns and Roses? And what did you think about it? And do you have any other scene ideas from this book or this series without giving any spoilers away? If people are planning to read these, we don't want to ruin it for them, but just scene descriptions of scenes that you'd like to see me recreate, or comment down below other books that you want me to read and recreate scenes from as well, because I would love, one, more book recommendations, and two, to recreate these really cool and iconic scenes that create really beautiful images in our heads. So comment down below some of those books and some of those scenes in those books that just create vivid images that you want to see brought to life. I think it would be really cool to hear some of your favorites. And now I'm just adding in a lot more shades of green and really trying to render the trees. I wanted them to look very neat but kind of messy and not over rendered, but not under rendered. And I know that probably makes no sense, but I was just trying to get them to that just right spot. So I added in more shades of green and more light. I decided to add in some yellow to really indicate that it's maybe a sunset time. And then after that, it was time to finally start working on some more more details, I decided to add even more shades of green, and here's that spring green being thrown in there. I feel like I needed a fresher, brighter green to indicate spring and not summer. I'm not even sure if that makes sense, but I'm sure you get it. And then after that, I just kept on adding in. I decided to add an oak tree in the front to kind of go along with what it was described as in the story. So I wanted to add this big tree to the front left, and so I added in the leaves for this one and tried to make it match to the background, but also make sure it looked a little different so it stood out from the other trees. And then after that, I decided to work on this little background a little bit more. It's closer to the side of the lake, and I wanted to add in some more details to this part, add in some brushes and some leaves, and I felt like it was really starting to come together, and I was getting to the point where I could work on the lake scene, and I am so excited. Like I said, it is literally the star of the show, so now it's time to start working on it. In the book, the lake is described as silver mainly, but it is also said when she gets closer that it is blue, purple, red, pink, yellow. It's a lot of different colors all together, kind of being swirled together. And obviously I'm imagining space, but I was also imagining an oil spill, which is not quite as glamorous. But do you know how you can see all of the different shades and colors in that? I felt like that was what was coming to mind. So I started off by just putting in a background of blue and purple to just indicate different depths, and now it's time to make it look like space. I wanted it to look like the literal cosmos were in this lake. For now, I just wanted to make sure that I incorporated all of the colors that were described in the book, and I had to use my color theory here and really make sure I didn't make any muddy colors. So I knew that I should put the yellow next to the pink next to the purple. You get the idea. I didn't want to put any colors together that would clash. If I put purple next to yellow, that would create brown. If I did things the wrong way, it would just not turn out right. Blue next to yellow obviously would be green. So I had to really use my brain here for this one and make sure that I put all of the colors next to each other that belong together, and then I could go in and add more details and refine everything and smooth everything together and blend it in a way that made it look and feel more like space and more like a rippling pool. So I added in some of those colors. I wanted to make sure that red and yellow were in there since they were specifically mentioned, although they were definitely the hardest to incorporate. I added yellow into the middle of the pool, kind of like it was maybe a source of light from the lake, and then I added in some red alongside the pink to deepen that color even more, and then I added in some blue just to make sure that was one of the main colors. For now, I left that to dry, that way I didn't mess anything up. I liked how it was looking kind of rough in a cloud kind of way. It wasn't all completely blended together, but it was looking blended enough, and that's exactly how I wanted it. So then I moved on to adding even more yellow and highlights to the top to really, again, make it look like that sunset golden hour. I'm just imagining the perfect time of day when the whole entire world turns orange and yellow, and it just looks so magical. So I really wanted that to peek through the trees. I still wanted the main color to be green since it's literally the spring court, but I wanted it also to reflect that time of day. So then this was one of my favorite parts. I added in some streams of sunlight through the left side to make it look like it was coming through the branches and just illuminate things a little bit more. And then I just added that in everywhere else to really sell that idea and blend it all out and make it cohesive. And that was really one of my favorite parts. Just adding in all of the details of the lighting on the top part was so satisfying. And this actually was another one of my favorite parts. I added in some flowers to make it read even more spring, because nothing screams spring more than flowers. Up until this point, I really hadn't worked on the foreground at all. I was saving it for the end for some reason, so I figured now it was time to start working on those details. And again, for this part, I really wanted to incorporate some of those flowers that we learned about before that were noted in the book, and I looked at pictures of these. There's bluebells, crocuses, and snowdrops, and then I went ahead and put those into the front, but that's not till later. But I did prep that, and now I'm just kind of creating a backlight to some of these leaves to make it look like the light is making them glow from behind. And I feel like that would also help the effect of the pool and make it look beautiful. I added in even more highlights and strands of grass and details. I wanted everything to be super detailed, and I took the tiniest little brush to add in a whole bunch of individual blades of grass and highlights, and this was so fun to go in and start finally getting everything down to the details and getting everything to start looking how I wanted it to. Especially these trees here, adding in the bark and the texture really brought it all together and started to make it look so complete and so beautiful. And then after that, I continued to just add in more highlights and get it all looking the right textures. I decided to add in more deep colors to the flowers to make them look shaded and bring them to life a little bit more. And now it's time to finish working on the lake. So this was already looking pretty good, but I wanted it to look just super extra magical. So I decided to use my fine brush to just bring in a whole bunch of detailed lines of color that really highlighted different areas of the lake and made it look even more like space and made the colors even more vibrant and cohesive. And this really tied the entire thing together and made it pop. It made it feel sparkly and magical and like it was literally illuminating the whole entire lake. And that was really fun, and this was definitely my favorite part. Now it's time for my signature sparkles, and this painting called for a lot of sparkle in the lake. I wanted it to look like it shimmered, so I used blue and yellow and pink to create stars and glimmer in the water to make it look sparkly, and I even incorporated a little bit of silver to make it glimmer and also to add in that effect since the pool is initially described as silver. Now it's time to come in and add those details to the foreground that I was talking about, making it complete with those flowers that are described in the book. I wanted the foreground to not distract too much from the beautiful lake. Obviously, that is the main focus of this, but I also wanted it to really read spring and capture the details that were described in the book. So I wanted to make sure that I included those in and brought them in a little bit more. So here I am putting in those bluebells first to start. I feel like it would be really pretty to put them off to the side and tie in that blue color over there. And then for the snowdrops, I decided that those ones would go in the middle, and those ones are a white flower. And for the crocuses, I put them over to the right, and I did purple since that's the color of those ones. And I loved that description. I feel like she had an artist in mind when describing this scene because all of those colors went so beautifully with the lake that she described. So I went ahead in and put all of those flowers and details in to really make it scream ACOTAR scene chapter 18. And then after that, I was down to adding in all of the tiny details that would make this feel complete. One of those details was adding in about 1 million more sparkles, adding in more shadows, and then I remembered that I also needed to add in some magical dandelion fluff floating through the air. Say that 10 times fast. That is a tongue twister. And then once I added in all of those magical elements and felt like the scene was really coming together, it was finally completed after adding a couple more sneaky sparkles. And here is the final picture. I think it turned out so beautiful, and it's exactly how I pictured it in the book, with the magical colors of the lake that look like the literal universe in a pond. And then on top of that, the glowing sunset trees, which just make the whole picture complete, along with the spring flowers and floating dandelions through the air. I love her description in the book, and I really feel like I brought it to life with this piece. And I obviously love how the lake turned out with all of the swirling colors of the cosmos in there. And I just think this scene was so beautiful, and it was so fun to actually create it in real life. Again, comment down below what scenes you would like to see me recreate from what books next, because this scene was so fun to recreate. This canvas that I made with you guys is going to be on sale on my website, Anchored Art Designs, along with prints of this picture and also a tiny print that just so happens to fit perfectly in your book, so that you can actually keep this image in your book book along with this scene description, just as a little picture while you're reading, which I think is really fun. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to shop any of these, they're on my website, anchoredartdesigns.com. You can shop the original, a print, or a mini book insert. Let me know what you think about these. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Again, you can shop these on my website, Anchor Dark Designs, and comment down below what book scene you want me to turn into art next.